This is the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason. I am joined by my co-host, Lowell Francis. Hi, Lowell.
Hey, Jason.
And our guest this week on the Hangouts Roundup is GM extraordinaire, game designer, and all-around lovely person, Tyler Lominack. Hi, Tyler.
Hi there. How are y'all?
Good, good.
Oh, doing great. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Listeners, we are going to talk about some of the games we have been playing. We are going to then go to the second segment where Tyler gets to speak about whatever he wants to speak about. That's his right as our guest. And then we're going to wrap up, as always, with Giving Me Life, which, Lowell, I've been really enjoying your characterization of Giving Me Life on the episodes without me, just so you know. I hear you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about games we've been playing. So, Lowell, break it down for us. How's it going?
So March was good, though. I had a week and a half of illness that knocked a bunch of games off my calendar, mostly face-to-face things, but also ate a couple of sessions on the Gauntlet. Off Gauntlet, I played Trail of Cthulhu and 13th Age and Bat Hack. And then on Gauntlet, I did Masks New Generation, the final part of the quarterly for that, Hearts of Wulin, and Legacy Life Among the Ruins.
Would that be the second edition of Legacy?
That would be the second edition. This will be actually the third time I've talked about it on the podcast, and the first time I think I actually get it.
Okay, all right.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot of play on Plus One Forward, too. Legacy gets a lot of coverage.
Yeah.
In spaces.
Well, and I think rightly. So, if you haven't heard of this, anyone at home, Legacy is a Powered by the Apocalypse game of generational play where you make up a family and you make up a character from that family. And it's kind of a weird post-apocalypse setting that you collaboratively create. It's not like Mad Max of Apocalypse World, but more like Numenera's Strangeness.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually the first game that I ran for the Gauntlet way back in the day, was the first edition of that, back when I did not know PBTA very well. And it was a terrible game to choose for my first Gauntlet PBTA game, but I had great players, including Jason, who were very generous. And I saw that there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, but I wasn't sure how the game all fit together, because the original Legacy is very small. It's a very thin little book. And Jay Isles, she's retooled Legacy since then, had a really successful Kickstarter. The new book is large and well put together and beautiful and has really deepened the game in a lot of great ways. If you're curious about that, as Jason said, there's also a Plus One Forward episode on that and another thing by Jay that I'll mention at the very end. So I liked it before. And the first edition, I tried it again with the second edition before I had the hardcover, before I had the final version. And it was okay because I didn't embrace the whole thing. I didn't realize that there are pieces and parts that I saw that I was like, oh, that sounds okay, but I want to focus on the things that I'm kind of used to running.
And that's so our way, right? Like,
Yeah.
We do this, right? I mean, on my other show, Fear of a Black Dragon, my whole thing is I just skipped all this boring shit and did the
Yes.
cool shit, right? Like, that's just kind of our way. So I can see how you would fall into that trap if it's important to the game.
Yeah, and having run a couple times before, this time I said, okay, let me go and really look at how Jay describes the shape of play, how things go. And the shape of play is that you've got family moves that are at the high level, and the families have playbooks, and they do things, and they interact with one another. They have treaty and things, and these are big scale moves. When a family does a move, it covers a lot of area, and that's actually true throughout this game. It's not particularly granular. Everything you do has big effects, and I kind of like that. So you're at the family level, and you do stuff with the family, and then at some point, based on play, you may need to what they call zoom in. And you zoom in to one or more of the PCs, the significant characters that everyone's made up from their family.
Mm-hmm.
In the other game I ran, everybody kind of gravitated together. So everybody tried to get all their characters into the same scene when they zoomed in, which is usual. That's PBTA. You want to kind of get everybody have shared the spotlight and stuff. But what Legacy has is when you zoom in on, say, Patrick's character, and Patrick's character is going to go out into the killing fields, the other players could maybe bring their characters along, or they can make up these quick characters from Patrick's family. And takes like 2 minutes to make a character. You choose a role, you choose a move, you set some stats, and you set a relationship. And I'm going to say this, when I saw this and ran Second E last time, I skipped over this. I did.
Okay.
It is the fucking secret sauce.
Oh.
It rocked. The first time we did it and everybody like had these quick characters that they told complete stories of, and Walter's character died this tragic death and left behind this legacy because that was built in. There were all these things that really clicked. And, we zoomed in several times, and each time it was really a joy to see it work. And if your character isn't in that scene, if when we do the zoom in, you've done a quick character, when we zoom back out, there's a move that we do for everybody who wasn't there. They get to make a choice, like their character did something. And it's like, oh, I got some data, or I got some tech, or I changed my character's role. So you're not losing anything in terms of advancement, because when we go back up to the top level, you get to do stuff. And we did that. I think we had 5 zoom-ins, and each one felt striking. It felt really definitive and changed what was going on. And the one where everybody's roles were terrible, and half the people died on Patrick's expedition, and Patrick and Darren walked away cursed and plague-filled, and it was pretty clear their characters were going to die soon. So that was really good. And then that actually rolled into the Turning of the Age, which is a mechanic for moving the world forward a generation. It's also really awesome and excellent. The game has map play. You build a map together, and instead of it kind of being, oh, we just got this map, you're really involved. You're constantly changing the map. You're developing it. It's really fun to look at. It became very central to the play, even in an online environment where, sometimes when you've had to move between the screens, some things can drop out. No, it stayed in, and it was great.
Interesting. I have not read the rules to either 1E or 2E yet because I haven't run it, and I typically only read games when I'm getting ready to run them, right?
Yeah.
So I don't remember, was that sort of like, I'm going to say like troop style play? Was that a thing in 1E that we just didn't do, or what?
I think so. I think it was because it was one of a bunch of rules, and I think the lead got buried. I think that's one of the things that Jay really did a great job in the second edition, was going, look, this is what you need to know about what the cycle of play looks like. Here is how that works, and put that more front and center. At least to my recollection of 1E, it's done a much better job of presenting what the play looks like.
I think that generational type games, I find those fascinating. How did that look at the table? I mean, was it a dramatic change when you did the shifting of the age?
Well, the interesting thing is there are some mechanics, like for your family has needs and your family has surpluses. And if you have more surpluses than needs, then your family's in a better mood. And at the end of the age, you actually roll with your mood. And that is a move. And then you've got this big list of bad things that happened to my family and good things that did. And so it became this really interesting play phase where you got these choices, and you had to figure out how that rolled out from the fiction you've already established in the age. And it felt distinctive and fun and not too cumbersome.
Do you age up or age out your characters? I mean, how is that handled?
That's the choice. Is in this case, I said to the players, now we can just go forward, 20 years, and you can keep your characters and age them up. Or we can go forward a couple of generations, and all of you can make up new characters. Ooh. And they were all like, we want to make up new characters.
Oh, that's neat.
And I was like, okay.
Interesting.
And they did.
Yeah.
And they all had characters that were, this is like the quick characters where you can kind of grab and put your head cannon out on the table. Moving your character and doing a different generation, you get to do a character that kind of comments on your previous character.
Oh, okay. Because
your character has maybe a different perspective. Your character has a different view on the legacy, and your family has changed in that generation. You have some options for choosing if your family's customs and stuff evolve. And so It's really rich. Really,
that
really
sounds
rich.
fantastic.
It does sound really good. Yeah, I like as you're describing it right now, this just sounds so much more like the game I kind of thought we were getting when I played it the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm delighted. I mean, it sounds like really, really fun to me.
Yeah.
Like this sounds like, I mean, it sounds like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Right?
It's here's the other thing. Let me say the last thing that just I absolutely love, that as a GM, sometimes when you're running PBTA, you're having fun, you're doing moves, you're kicking things off, but people may be rolling really well and you're kind of sitting there and you're doing traffic management. And that's fun. And it's fun seeing what spins out. One of the big spaces that is left on the table for the GM in this is connecting ideas together. Because everybody creates all these little bits of the world, but we don't know how the pieces all fit together. Like, okay, we've seen that all these things are happening which involve biology and metamorphic changes and things like that. And then as a GM, when they went to explore ruins or find out secrets about the Lost World, I was able to go, wow, this is how this connects to that. And this is how this virus that's changing everybody to look like this Chad guy who looks like a surfer, why there's this thing and how it relates to everybody's choices about stuff. And that GM role of pulling all the lore together and then going, and here's the secret behind it, and everybody going, whoa, because
and this is my jam. Oh my God.
So fucking my jam. There is a moment in that last session where I pulled all these pieces together and I was like, I am on it. And everybody, Patrick was like, that is so cool. Yeah, it's dynamite. If as a GM you like letting players run, but you're also thinking about the world in the background and you'd like to pull some pieces together, this is a game for that.
Yeah, this sounds great. I have to say, I'm immediately sold on this. Like, this sounds like the game I want to play. And it sounds like with not too much trouble, you could maybe make it into like a Song of Ice and Fire thing, right?
Oh, dude. Now, I'll come to that again, but I'm going to reskin this and just change the names for fantasy and run this again later this year.
I would. This seems like such a doable thing, and like, why doesn't she have it up on Kickstarter already, like kind of thing, right?
Well, and the thing is, like, they've got this Order of the Titan, which are kaiju hunters, dragon hunters. I mean, that's easy. Okay, these are the people that deal with dragon stuff. There's all kinds of things that are going to work.
And I bet it would really sing in that kind of 8 to 12 session range that you do with your quarterly stuff. That would be really interesting.
And that's one of the things is, I will say, this is a game that needs room to breathe. I ran it for 5 sessions, and I'm so glad I did. We took the first full session that was all world and character building, and I loved it. Usually I like a half session for that, but I was fine with it here. And then 4 solid sessions, and we could have gone another 4, we could have gone another 8. This game, I think you need to give it at least 6 sessions. I would say that. If somebody wants to run it, set yourself a goal of at least 6 sessions.
Okay.
There are other games that I've seen that don't have like really super tight genre touchstones. Dungeon World has genre touchstones. Apocalypse World does, where you can kind of get, what the drama form is, and you can kind of get it tightly into that. But this reminds me of Pig Smoke, in that Pig Smoke is kind of complicated, and it's not entirely clear what the drama and genre arc is of it. But you'll find great stuff, but you've got to give it a bunch of sessions to do that because there's so much going on to let it find its flow.
Well, you mentioned Numenera, and one of the things that pings to me is, and it's my criticism of Numenera, is that is a fantastically ornate setting, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're talking high levels of cognitive load, high levels of like difficulty in getting everybody's headcanon to match up.
And
that can be a real impediment, right?
It shouldn't be. Here's the Numenera, the pitch, the 9th age. The world is weird. Here's a bunch of tools for making up weird shit. Here's all of these tools. Instead, Numenera goes through and defines every freaking region.
Right, yeah. It's got that trad impulse, right, which makes a lot of sense. Well, so I guess that's kind of what I was like leading to, is does Legacy 2E do that?
It doesn't have that cognitive load for the world. It is a lot to take in. It is a lot of rules. It will take your players a couple of 3 sessions to get a hold of exactly what's going on. It will
but no setting mastery, right?
Yeah, because there are a bunch of different moves and a bunch of different choices. And because the family moves don't exactly function like character moves, you've got to get a sense of what the scale is for those things. And Jay has built lots and lots of moves. All of the different quick characters for all of the different families have their own individual set of moves.
Interesting.
And they're great. They are dynamite, but there's just a lot there. You're going to need to sit down and read through the rule book. I don't think you can get away with just running it from the play sheets. You've got to read, got to read the book. And I think that's a challenge for people who, like me, zip through different games. And I'm so glad I went back to this and put the work in and did it. It's not like I have to do a lot of prep, but you need to read and grok the rules.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable. I mean, it's not an unreasonable expectation.
It's a great game. I'm going to run it again. The book is lovely. You should buy it. Jay also commissioned a whole bunch of really interesting sort of standalone worlds. There's one that's essentially the equivalent of Alpha Centauri. There's one that's on a generation ship. There's one that's diceless with the Fall of the Gods. They're all great.
It is beautiful.
They're all really interesting. Great. And I'm looking forward to this Russian one, Under the Yoke, that's coming out. It's all solid stuff. And I know we just had this on Plus One Forward. This Mythsea, I'm probably pronouncing it terribly. It's
Mythsea, I think.
Mythsea.
Yeah, because I got that wrong before. I thought it was Mythsea when I originally put the episode up, and then Rich corrected me. He's like, no, it's Mythea. Regrettably, I'm ashamed to say I have not listened to the episode yet, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But in my defense, it just went up.
Yeah, but yeah, I backed that right away. It has city building, and it's in this fantasy realm, and it looks dynamite, and I am all over that. So I recommend, if that's still on Kickstarter when you're listening to this episode, man, go and check the PBTA Plus One Forward episode, and maybe look at that Kickstarter. Really good. Great game. I'm so glad I ran it.
Fabulous. Tyler, do you have any questions for Lowell before we move on?
No, it really sounds like a fascinating, interesting game. I am looking forward to going through it myself.
And your husband, Patrick, was a delight.
Yes, and is pushing me very much to learn it and run it.
He's always a delight, though. You're both always a delight. Let's go to you then, Tyler. Tell us what you've been playing.
Off of Gauntlet, I played Chronicles of Darkness, which is a campaign that's been over 5 years running and is nearing its final end. It's a mixed group from World of Darkness, but primarily vampire. I run Blades of the Dark, which I started just a couple of months ago with a face-to-face group. Played Scion 2nd Edition, which is finally going to send us a book soon, hopefully with some noted things that it needed. And I played Rich Rogers' Bat Hack. Then on the Gauntlet, I had a really emotional set of games that I played. I did Jason Cordova's amazing The Between, which is just, golly bum, it is so good.
Oh, thank you.
Every time we play it, it really grabs you with emotion. I also played our own Sid Icarus's Writers Last Rites, which I think they did for the Sad Mech Jam.
Right. Yeah, I think that's correct.
It's a diceless game. It is very improv-oriented, but it grabbed a hold of all of us playing. It's about a mech pilot who has passed away, and the friends and commanding officer coming together to discuss their lives and kind of deciding what to do with that mech. And it brought a lot of emotion. It really brought us at several points to tears. And it's a really pretty game too. Just a gorgeous game. I also played the Mustang, which is by John Harper.
Story game classic.
Yeah, another very emotional game. I ran that, brought everybody to tears. Fantastic game. But the one I want to really talk about is WWW with the Road expansion.
Woot.
And when you say WWW, you mean Worldwide Wrestling.
I do indeed. Worldwide Wrestling by Nathan Paletta. The Road expansion is by Adam Ultraberg, is how he listed that. And Worldwide Wrestling, I imagine people have heard it talked about before, is about professional wrestling.
Right.
And it takes place primarily at the event, in the ring, the things going on right there in a wrestling match. The Road expansion comes in and brings in the elements of what a wrestler's life is like outside of the event, outside of the ring.
Oh, okay.
And because I will say right off, I'm a huge fan of professional wrestling, have been since I was a kid. I delve into the kind of the myth of wrestling, the history of it. And wrestling is a hard business. Wrestlers have to go through a great deal, especially when you're talking about those that aren't the Hulk Hogans or the Triple H's, those who are out there, several times a week, having to travel to tiny little venues, getting paid very little money, and putting their body on the line. What the road does is it introduces elements such as your traveling companion, because wrestlers on this kind of level are so poor, you really can't travel yourself. You team up with someone in a lot of cases. So how do you get along with that person as your real person rather than this wrestling gimmick? It deals with like partying after you have an event and what kind of trouble you can get yourself into as a semi-public figure out there blowing off steam in public. It deals with going out and doing the advertising and the promotion of the wrestling promotion itself. It has a whole section on your family, whether your family approves of what you're doing, whether your family doesn't. And there's a difference in the mechanic that talks about whether your family approves of it or doesn't approve of it and how that affects you mechanically. It also deals with drugs, from the taking drugs because you're injured and how to keep your body moving.
Yeah.
As well as the people, sadly, wrestling has a lot of people who become addicted to drugs. And
yeah,
it's tragic how young wrestlers die, how often it is a problem of, suicide, or the toll that drugs have taken, or the accumulation of so much damage. I love WWW. I have played plenty of times with the Master Lowell Francis running.
You mean the what's this called? The masked luchador?
That's it.
Yes, the hooded luchador.
The hooded luchador, right? Yeah. There's a deep cut for you, listeners.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the game. I like a lot of what it does. I like the feel it has. But I'll tell you, after using the road, I don't know if I would ever play over that.
I'm here with you. Like, I'm gonna cut you off real quick. What you've just described is what I thought I was getting with Worldwide Wrestling when I first bought it. I thought the game was going to be more about their behind the scenes life, and I actually make it that way when I run it. Like, I kind of force it, But I love that it's on the road. You said
it's the road.
Oh, the road. I like that the road brings all that stuff to the forefront, because I'm gonna tell you, I'm right there with you, Tyler. This is what I love about wrestling. I'm a big wrestling fan too. I have been living in Oklahoma for the last year and a half, and in case you don't know, Oklahoma is the birthplace of much of professional wrestling.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
And last year I had several chances. I went to a local promotion where I was living, and it was great. Like, I mean, super low budge, right? It's not like we're not talking WWE here, right? But like, just the passion and the energy of the pro wrestling fan, this sort of like the athleticism on display, the dedication, because like you said, these guys don't make a lot of money, right?
Absolutely not.
They don't get almost nothing, right? I mean, it's like, what I mean to say is, like, they're way more healthy, less destructive to your body manners of earning a living for money, right?
Absolutely.
And so the passion comes through, right? Like, I mean, that nexus of, I am destroying my body. I am living on the edge of poverty because I love this activity so much. I love this sport so much. That's the emotion of wrestling, right? That's the core of wrestling. And so I'm delighted to hear this. I remember hearing some rumblings about this road expansion, but I haven't looked at it yet. But this sounds like my WWW.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
And I'll tell you, Adam did a fantastic job with it.
I'm just so glad that it's out there. I had kind of stuck with the mainline thing, and I had looked at it, but I hadn't really looked at it to run. So I was so excited to hear you were using it. So I'm glad to hear that it's great.
Well, and what I found was, when I started off the first session, I went ahead and had us define out kind of why they wanted to wrestle, and had a scene from before the promotion started, because it was a touring show.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to introduce family of people right off the bat. We got to introduce the kind of conflicts of being on the road and away from the people you care about. We talked about what made that wrestler, that person, decide, I'm going to commit myself to something that very likely I will never be the top tier. I will never make money doing. It was fascinating. And my players, wonderful players, had a rotating cast. I ran for 5. A lot of people came in. Several stayed all the way through. Created these backstories in play. I mean, it wasn't like we did a whole bunch beforehand. In play that were so deep. Gerwin played in it and created this very $1 million man, asshole, I'm richer than you character who, going from show to show, drove around in one of those little RVs you put on the back of a pickup truck with his daughter Princess, who was his valet, and her little dog Fufu. And we got to see him as this crazy heel, but he was out there doing this because his daughter was a violin student, and he was trying to get enough money to pay for her to go to a good music school. So the emotion that got brought in from that, it was so neat to see the juxtaposition of a heel and a really good person out of the ring, which I hadn't seen before in WWW in a lot of cases.
I'm loving that. Yeah, like this just all sounds so A+ to me.
Yeah.
The shackles of our format require you to say what you're less sure about, though.
They do it. I do want to also say that as a big positive, Ferret was playing with us, and he looked at me to say, I can't believe I'm crying for WWW.
Oh, I want to throw in some love for Ferret too, because I'll tell you what, I've had the chance to play with Ferret a fair amount lately, the last few months, and Ferret brings such dynamic
absolutely.
play to the table, like just
I'm so jealous.
Just fully embraces like what the game is about, the spirit of the game. Like we played my Monster Hearts ballroom thing together, and Ferret was the one person who they brought their fan. They were doing their thing. Ferret is just an exceptional player. I'm so into having them at the table. So Ferret, if you're listening, just know that we love you.
Yeah, I'm jealous you guys have gotten to run for him. I really want to. I've heard such good things about
much energy, such an amazing player. I'm looking forward to, I can't remember exactly what the game is, but Ferret's going to be running me the next coming up here in a month or so.
Nice, cool.
Awesome.
Things, though, that did kind of bother me a little, and I don't have a lot of problems with the road itself. I'm not going to talk about WWW. We've heard about that quite a bit, I'm sure, over the years. But I want to talk about the road and some things that were in there. One of them, and this is probably more personal taste than a thing about what Adam was doing. There's a move in there called the First City Saint, which has to do with if you become addicted to drugs and go into recovery and then come back and use that recovery to get over with the crowd, or have someone who is wrestling against you use that against you to get over with the crowd. I chose to not include that just because I think recovery it's a very personal thing. I found it disingenuous when I have seen it done in wrestling. I kind of pulled it from mine.
Okay.
I think, though, that Adam has all the best intentions with it, and it's worth noting that below that segment, he has listed out recovery websites and places to go to if you have that problem.
Oh, good.
So he did
complete
due diligence with it. It was just something I didn't particularly want to put into my game.
Fair.
And along with that, I'm going to say, you've really got to change the way you play WWW.
I was going to say.
The pacing becomes a very different thing, and how you decide to spend your time becomes different. I ran for 3 hours. At the end of each one of them, my players were like, I wish we'd have played longer. And it's because when you go into these personal and the road elements, you want to give them that time to breathe. And I always like to give my players a lot of space to interact with each other, to explore the emotion they're feeling in the scenes. And so I was finding that an hour and a half into a game or more, I still hadn't even gotten us to a wrestling ring.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
And so we, from suggestions from the players, we started mixing things up a little. Like I was doing the road as the opening bit and all of these background things to, before a match. We switched that around. Had a piece of a match, or had a piece of an event as the opening. So we saw the big group schmoz oriented King of the Hill match at the beginning. And then all the rest of the time was spent with the personal road things and backstage and moving to the next event. That sort of thing.
Smart.
Yeah, that's smart.
Another thing that, and this is probably the most nitpicky little complaint I could ever have, the catch-all move, the default, the road move, is a standard PBTA style move. 10 plus is success, middle is the classic 3, and 6 is failure. It does it does what it's supposed to do. I would have wished there was a little bit more customization, but that's such a nitpicky thing for what I think Adam did magnificently. And so I'll tell you, I don't think I can run WWW without bringing those elements in.
Wow.
I'm running it again this month, and it's not our focus, but I'm still putting some stuff of that forward. It just really, it shakes up the game.
That's great.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is the game that I wanted WWW to be, right? That I forced it to be when I ran it, right? That maybe was defeating certain players' expectations, but now I can pick up the road and be like, this is what we're doing.
Absolutely. So. And at least in spirit, you're both there, because Jeremy Bleakwood and Wolf Backhouse are still tormenting our wrestlers in my game.
Nice.
Ooh, full of deep cuts tonight. Lowell, do you have any questions about Worldwide Wrestling the Road?
No, I think it's really interesting. We talk about these issues in the same week that John Oliver took on the WWE, and people are talking about the kinds of issues that are happening. So that's very cool.
Awesome. Well, so I have, as of late, I only play on the Gauntlet. I had something of a turbulent month, and so I didn't get to game as much as I wanted to, but I did get a chance to play Hearts of Wulin, The Trial of Many Venoms. That's what my little thing was called. It was Hearts of Wulin, which I have professed my love for repeatedly on this show. I love it so much. But set in an Assassins tournament. I actually used one of your starters from your blog post. Yeah, this sort of tournament of assassins. And so the whole series, it was like, I think with 4 sessions maybe. The whole series was kind of, the first session was sort of like arriving at this island. And then we had like a session of like the night before the tournament starts, like in the little village. And then we had like 2 sessions of like the tournament itself. And that tournament structure was like really great, because it was really great because I let the players kind of like call their own matches, right? So we've been building up these entanglements and all these little problems in the first couple sessions. And then they got to sort of like tailor the card, so to speak, right, to make sure that the fights that they were engaged in the tournament like helped exercise those entanglements. It was very, very good.
Tournaments, by the way, are the best go-to things for any game. I honestly believe.
I'm convinced. I'll tell you that it was anyway, super fun. Love Hearts of Wulin. Yeah. We're gonna have way more to say about that soon.
Yeah.
I also played a game called Vigor. It was a play test being run by our own Jake Householder. Oh. Jake has a design partner for Vigor, and I can't remember that person's name. I know their first name is Ben, so I apologize. I think it's Ben. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong. But in any case, playtest for this game called Vigor. I don't know how much I can talk about yet, and so I'll kind of keep my commentary limited here. But I will say that I think it's really groundbreaking. I think what it's doing is wildly different in story game space, and I like it. The space it plays in is collaborative writer's room style world building, and that's like the mechanics hang on that, right? And I really liked it. Like, it felt really good as a player. It felt, I mean, the stories, it was very much like we talk at the table. We have some procedures in place for like developing the world, and then we dive into scenes, and then we kind of dive out and we do a little bit more of that, what they call weaving in the game. It's a mechanic. We do some weaving, and then we dive back into the scenes. And as you're playing, you're just gradually developing this like quite rich like story, and I'm very, very pleased with it. I can't wait to see what they do with it. But Vigor. So anyway, I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the future. I also got a chance to play Dark Designs in Verdigris, which is the sort of WODU or World of Dungeons / OSR Oz game that we published in Codex Emerald by Richard Ruane. Super, super fun. It's this sort of like Oz has fallen, the Emerald City has collapsed, and all that's left is this like dark undercity called Verdigris beneath the Emerald City. And your characters are kind of like interacting with the different factions that are trying to control Verdigris, and that was really, really fun. We didn't get a chance to conclude that series because of some stuff that was kind of going on in my personal life, but the little bit that we got to play was really, really enjoyable. The thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to be fairly brief, is Crossroads Carnival. Now, I've talked about Crossroads Carnival on this show before, and so I'm not going to belabor kind of what it is too much, except to say that Crossroads Carnival is a Powered by the Apocalypse game written by Kate Bullock, being published by Magpie Games, and in the game, you portray carnival sideshow freaks, okay? And what you're doing from session to session, or, well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but what you're doing is you're moving from town to town, and you, as the sideshow performers, you are kind of like literal monsters as well, kind of like in Monster Hearts. And what you're doing is you are trying to save these towns. The towns are suffering from the Dust Bowl. It's Dust Bowl era game, but the Dust Bowl era is kind of, the metaphor for it is like the monstrousness that's taken over any particular town. And so you're playing these sideshow performers who are very like Monster Hearts-esque kind of characters, in that they like are people, but they're also literal monsters who can like go into a sort of darkest self type state, right? These characters are trying to save the rubes, basically, right? But the sort of like twist of it, and what makes the game super emotionally impactful and interesting, is that the rubes, they other you. They often don't like you, right? Because you're a sideshow performer, right? And so it's this interesting contrast of like, why do you fight for humanity when humanity doesn't give a shit about you, right? It's that kind of thing, right? And that should sound familiar, right? There are lots of it's fertile ground in fiction and stuff, right? Like the X-Men, for example. That's kind of what the game is about. It's the HBO show Carnival, but like the role-playing game, basically. I love it. It's such a great game. What I want to talk about is the last time I ran it, it was a pre-Ashcan set of rules, very, very early draft that Kate gave me, and we had a good time with it. It was super solid, super enjoyable. I was able to kind of make it work for me, but last time I talked about it, I did identify like what I consider to be some problems with the core rules, particularly around the basic moves. And I'm going to just say that in the Ashcan, those things are quite a bit improved. So the basic moves, previously my gentle knock on it was that I felt like the basic move triggers were difficult to fire off. Like I had a hard time getting them to fire off because they were so specific. They had like this specificity that was difficult to work with. But that has changed in the Ashcan. In the Ashcan, it's so much cleaner, so much more clear and apparent, like how you're supposed to use the moves and engage with the moves. And so really, really loved that. And there's just overall been a great tightening up of the playbooks. The playbook moves all feel like a lot more solid, a lot more impactful. The basic sort of core gameplay loop is really great, which is in order to fight the darkness, you have to embrace the darkness a little bit, right? Shades of Urban Shadows there, right? You have to embrace the darkness to fight the darkness. And when you embrace the darkness and indulge your monstrousness in order to help people, you are sliding closer and closer to being irredeemably like dark, right? Like you kind of you're kind of done, right? In order to avoid that, you have to have like more tender moments and more these like downtime moments with characters in order to kind of come back from that. And so it's got this nice like loop, really, really enjoyable. Just my general impressions of the game. This is a space that I personally love to play in. I am very into horror. I am very into emotion. And this is like a great nexus of horror and emotion and big like melodramatic settings. Like it's just stuff I'm really into, right? And so I love running the game, and the Ashcan version is pretty good. It's definitely a good, strong hint of what's to come. I do want to say that the Ashcan is a hint of what's to come. There's still a lot that is unclear to me, and I think we're going to have to wait for the final rule set to know for sure. And the number one thing is the game has this implied structure that is not in the Ashcan. So that structure is this, I'm just guessing here, but there's this implied town structure where you go from town to town, and each town has like a monster or some kind of monstrous problem. And the Ashcan doesn't have any of that in it. So in order to play the game now at this point, you have to be the kind of GM who's capable of just coming up with something, right? And so I can do that. I've run lots of Monster of the Week. I mean, if what's implied is it's going to have like a Monster of the Week kind of like pacing to it, right? Like each town is a new thing, and you're going to have a monster and all that kind of stuff.
I ran it, and I'm 100% with you on that. I kind of like took Dogs in the Vineyard kind of as my thinking when I was trying to structure how it went. But yeah, it is a game that has, it had to do a little more building than,
right.
I can see that there was skeleton there.
Right.
That will be very cool.
I can see where the game is going, and I can see what the final text is going to look like. But at this point, it's not in the Ashcan, and so you have to be ready to bring that to the table. I think your note about dogs is actually a really, really good one. And I used kind of Monster of the Week as my kind of framework, and that worked great for me. But just know that if you're going to pick up the Ashcan and run it, you got to be ready to do that. The other thing that I'll just kind of say as like a thing you need to be aware of, there is not a huge amount of GM support in the game. There's some, and like you get a lot of like, okay, here's the principles, here's the agenda. You get a lot of that, but there's a lot of times when the text like makes big assumptions about what you know about Powered by the Apocalypse games. For example, harm and healing is like not really touched on in the rules, right? And so I don't quite know how that's supposed to work. And just little things like that. If you've got experience with PBTA games, you can make it work. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But picking up the Ashcan, like you just have to kind of know that going into it, right? Like it's not a complete game, and you have to kind of fill in the gaps. But if you're willing to fill in those gaps, though, I'll tell you, Crossroads is good. I so fucking dig it.
Agreed.
Any questions for me about Crossroads?
Well, I know Patrick played it with you and had a fantastic time with it. And one of the things he spoke to me about was kind of the dual elements of those playbooks, that there's almost a metaphoric quality to, the depth of what each of those was. And it sounded really fascinating. Did you see that? Did it come into play?
My best comparison is Monster Hearts again. Like, Monster Hearts, they are teenagers for all intents and purposes, but every now and then their monstrousness rises to the surface and it becomes a lot more literal, more than a metaphor. That was my feeling on it. Patrick was actually playing probably the least monstrous of them. Patrick was playing the fortune teller character, right? No, Patrick still managed to work in a lot of like good ghoulish shit, because that's what Patrick does. But there are certainly some of the playbooks are definitely like a little bit more on the nose. Like the dog-faced boy playbook, they're basically a werewolf, right? Like they are a werewolf type character, right? The snake charmer is, has like snake-like powers and stuff, right? And can control snakes and turn into snakes. So, I mean, I don't know if it's like that much of a separation. I think we maybe didn't go there too much because we're so much more inclined to play in a more like kind of humanistic way, if that makes sense. We didn't get to see the big, startling, striking, monstrous, scary stuff until the end, because that's just how I pace the series. That's another thing a little note I had about the game. I've talked to Kate plenty about this game, and Kate indicates to me that like you should be able to finish a town in one session, but it takes me like 4. I cannot finish a town in like less than 4 sessions. And I don't know if it's just it's the pace I go at. I do like a sort of like low simmer that builds up kind of thing, you know. But I've played with this group for 7 sessions now, and we only did 2 towns and all of that. So, and we loved it. That's not a knock on the game. Like we loved it. We were having a good time, and a lot of that might just come down to the fact that like that structure part of it is not in the rules yet. So if I kind of had that in hand, I might do it differently. But that was Crossroads Carnival. I don't know, I strongly recommend it. I'm excited to see where it's going. It's just my jam, and that's all I can say about it. Let's go to the second segment. Hi listeners, I want to tell you about the Gauntlet Patreon. The Gauntlet is one of the most active, vibrant communities in tabletop role-playing games. We produce podcasts, the Codex Zine, Gauntlet Hangouts, Gauntlet Con, and more. If you love small press, independent tabletop role-playing games, the Gauntlet is for you. And you can help keep things going by pledging to our Patreon. This year we have 4 different pledge levels for you to join at, each of which comes with a number of benefits. At the $2 level, you get early access to our actual play podcasts, including Pocket Size Play, as well as a special Keeper of the Gauntlet title. At the $5 level, you also get a PDF of our monthly zine, Codex. Your name and Keeper of the Gauntlet title is listed in the back of each issue of Codex while your pledge is active. At the $6 level, you also get access to the Gauntlet Slack group, which is the heart of our community. And at the $8 level, you get early RSVP access to new game events on Gauntlet Hangouts. The $8 spots are limited based off how many early access players we think the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar can support. Every month on the 15th, we will make a small number of new $8 spots available. So if you want to play games with the Gauntlet, make sure you keep an eye on our Patreon page around that time so you can grab one of those rare spots. Finally, every member of the Gauntlet Patreon, no matter the level they pledge at, gets to attend Gauntlet Con each year for free. Gauntlet Con is our incredible online gaming convention with over 200 game events and panels, competitions and prizes, and our bumpin' Gauntlet Con Discord server. Folks, we can't do all this awesome stuff without you, so go check out our page and please consider pledging. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks. All right, it's our guest segment. Tyler, what are we talking about today?
Well, I kind of wanted to bring up a facet of the Gauntlet that I think we're all aware of, but don't always think about how amazing it is, which is the vast international reach that we gained.
Yes, yeah. We don't talk about that enough. You're right.
We are now on 6 continents. If we could get someone there on Antarctica, we'll have them all. We have seen some really amazing gifts that are coming to the community from our international elements. A lot of the developers, a lot of the designers that are here, and we have a lot in Gauntlet, but we're seeing that coming from Europe, and we're seeing that out of Australia. We're seeing amazing things being made by people who are part of the Gauntlet. And also, we have had such great ambassadors for what the Gauntlet is that have come from our international community. I think of Garrett Righthouse, who has
Garrett's my number one. Yeah.
Went out there and really dug for the Gauntlet to make us known in Germany and in the rest of Europe. Just a fantastic job, and every time these people come in, it makes our whole community richer. And I play a lot with the international crowd. I have an odd schedule.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Yeah.
I work in the service industry, so my normal days are from like 2 in the afternoon to 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And so I've gotten used to playing with like that ASPAC time. It's 3 or 4 in the morning for me, but I'm used to staying up till 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, so I can get the sleep I need. And playing with them has been amazing because there are different aesthetics that come. And I don't want to make broad generalities about what people are like from different places. But when I play with the ASPAC, it has been enjoyable because of a lot of the emotional depth that every time those games bring. There's also a lot of chatter on that side chat when you play with some of those aspects. Like, they really get into that, and it's encouraging. It gives an energy to the game. I've been running lately at 2:30 p.m. in my time zone, but that's really perfect for the European time zone. And so I've been lucky enough to get a good chance to play with people from the UK or people from Germany. Pavel in Poland, I get to play with Pavel.
Oh.
And it's just, it's really spectacular to see, again, kind of a different viewpoint, because I'll run games. I'm as American as you can get. I'm as Southern as a person can get. So a lot of the things that I use as tropes or things I take for granted as general knowledge are not the same.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of cases, things that are those tropes that are recognized are coming from American television.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes, the reality that I take for granted people will know is not the same, of course, as television. We're not all on Dallas or whatever, as a terrible example. Yeah. But it's made me a better GM, because it makes me work my descriptions so they are real for anyone. I've also really enjoyed the fact that when we have people with all these different viewpoints coming into our community, it lets us all experience things from a different point of view. Because a lot of us in America kind of get that myopic view of America, and that's all we know, and that's all we think about. And it is just elevating to have all these different inputs and insights into what's going on and how a game affects what's going on when you take that kind of reality and lay that on top of a game. They have whole new insights into what that means.
That's super fascinating. I agree. I love that we have been pretty international for a while now. This is not like a totally new development, right? But I agree. I have actually, because I have a flexible work schedule, I've actually been scheduling most of my games to be around 1:00 Central Time, which actually works out perfectly for the Europeans, right? And so I've had a chance to play with a lot of our UK members and a lot of our German members as of late. And I agree with everything you've just said. There are a few really fascinating aspects to it. You're right. There is like a different kind of like aesthetic in the way like things are described, and the way the way you have to approach descriptions and things. You do have to sort of be ready to explain Americanisms, right?
Absolutely.
Like that is a thing. But also there's an interesting aspect which one thing that's a conversation that's like really, really hot in the tabletop role-playing game scene right now is like representation, particularly for people of color, right? That's a big, big deal right now in the hobby, as it should be. But what I think is really fascinating is that is born almost entirely out of America's hangups on race, right? And my impression is that like a lot of our international friends maybe don't quite have the same like understanding or sensitivity to it, right? But it's fascinating to see them like kind of keeping up with the conversation and like embracing the conversation, right? Because I do think that like when an American talks about issues like race and representation, it's really, really different when like somebody from another country does.
I think it's like we're all having these conversations in our different gaming communities, but each one of them is at kind of like at a different point in the cycle of where that discussion is at, or what the high point is, because those keep going around. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's just one observation. I agree though that like our big international presence is it really enriches the community in a huge way. You brought up Garrett, which is a great. Garrett has been a fantastic cheerleader for the Gauntlet,
yes.
And I've had a chance to play a lot of games with Garrett, and one of the things that we got a chance to play together was this game called The Election of the Wine Queen, right? Online live action game. We just published it in Codex Sunlight, actually. But that involved a German a rural German tradition that I did not know anything about. And when Garrett was originally pitching the game to me, and I did dev editing on the English translation too, and when I was reading through it, Garrett had explained to me like what this was, right? Like I just had no idea like what the wine queen election, what this tradition was. It just was just totally foreign to me. But I learned. That's just one little note, but there's lots and lots of notes like that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I had Pavel in my Tales from the Loop game, and we got into a lot of discussion because that's steeped in 80s Americana about European school structures. And of course, he wanted to be a baseball player and kind of went through the terminology on that. And that's great. The other anecdote I have to share is the other morning I'm playing, who I've been playing with a few weeks, and Ari, who I'm playing with, goes, yeah, it's 9 o'clock here in Bangkok. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I had no idea he was in Bangkok. Mm-hmm. I've been playing with him for a long time and no clue that's where he was. Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yeah.
Tom, my co-host on Fear, is he lives in Hong Kong, and he's lived in Hong Kong for most of his adult life, right? I mean, the international it's fascinating. I love it. It just makes our community so cool.
Right, and I think, I mentioned Europe and Australia, but I think it's amazing how many people we've had join from Central America. We have people coming from South America, and they're making games. We're seeing things coming out of there that are just making the entire industry better, and they're doing it here. And that's just a wonderful thing. I want to mention also that this wasn't March, but it was in February. I did the Gauntlet developmental camp.
Right, yeah, the game facilitator thing, right?
Right, and I had set it for 2:30 Eastern with the idea that it would give an opportunity for folks in the European time zone to come in, and that is exactly what happened. I had someone from the UK, which is Alan Rees, who is going to be an amazing, just a rock star player and GM.
I played Storm Riders with Alan. He's great.
I had Marco Bittner, who is also wonderful in Germany.
Awesome.
Luke Cade in Australia. I mean, we were from all over. And of course, I had, Michael Mendoza from here in America with us. And it was just really very nice to have so many coming in from across the globe, really, joining in to be a part of what we do here. And
love it.
It just,
I love it.
It just makes your heart grow huge.
I love it. I'm crying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like crying right now. I really love it. Like it really touches my heart. Like I love it so much.
So that's what I wanted to bring up, because I sometimes think we forget just how broad the reach of what the Gauntlet is doing, and just how lucky we are to have people from everywhere coming in and bringing so much to the table for us.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's go to Giving Me Life. That's Giving Me Life, but let's go to Giving Me Life. It's Giving Me Life. Tyler, what's... Lowell, don't laugh. Tyler, Lowell, why don't you start so you can stop laughing? What's Giving You Life?
You had mentioned, Jason, a while back that you had been following this podcast on Shudder. They have a video podcast.
Video Palace.
Video Palace.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
And I'm about halfway through it, and I'm like, oh
my
man.
God, isn't it good? It's so good. Yeah.
It's all the kind of shit that I love of urban legends and people discovering stuff and weird found footage things. And it reminds me a little bit, you talked about with public access, and it's certainly priming the pump for Nagoya County.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
And man, it is good. If it's on the Shudder channel, and you can also get it as just a straight podcast feed. So I highly recommend it.
Me too. I'll second that heartily. Tyler, what's Giving You Life? Last
month was my birthday, so I made it another year. And my lovely husband gave me a new book set. I came out here last time and talked about how I love historical naval stories and books. He gave me the Alexander Kent series, which is in the similar vein to Forrester's Horatio Hornblower or the Maturin and Aubrey books. Except Alexander Kent does something a little different than any of the others I've seen. He really goes into the gore, the fear, the blood of a naval combat.
Ooh.
I mean, it is It is the shitting and pissing yourself element.
Man after my heart. Yep. Yep.
And to have someone address it so very bluntly, to bring up the elements of how your honor is supposed to keep you from running, but how does any person stand up to, a broadside throwing 100 tons of metal at you while your friends are cut down beside you and blood and sweat and smoke is everywhere. And it has, the dark bloodiness of it is giving me life.
Well, I love it. I'm here for it. We have that shared love of naval stuff, you and I, Tyler, and I always take your suggestions, and I'll check that
It's
one out.
awesome.
The thing giving me life, the Gauntlet forums are giving me life. We launched our forums, I want to say it's about 2 weeks now or so ago, and I am so far just loving the conversation. I'm really, really digging the development of the Gauntlet forums. G+ closed, which is sad.
Today, as of this recording.
Today was the day. It was really sad. We built our community on G+, right? I mean, that's where everything got started with us. And so it was really sad. But what I love is the forums. The forums are so young and vibrant right now. And it feels like the old days of the Gauntlet G+ community. It really does feel like that. I mean, the conversations are ordered and threaded a little bit differently, obviously, because it's forums and not G+. But this idea of having this space that is just really, really laser focused on the theory of play and the theory of role-playing game design, and with that special secret sauce of Gauntlet Nice, right? All that stuff combined is just so great. It's I feel sad about G+ closing, I hate that it happened.
Yeah.
And I particularly mourn for all those great communities who many of them didn't go anywhere else, right? Maybe they went to MeWe, or maybe they went to a Discord, but they kind of are scattered to the wind. Right?
I'll just say two things about that. With the last year and a half, I will say G+ has, I think, across the board diminished.
I agree completely. I do. Yeah.
And also, I love all the positivity we got from G+, but G+ also created a cesspit that allowed for the breeding of some horrible, horrible things.
I agree completely. I do not want to minimize that. I mean, some of the worst actors in our space arose on G+, right? Well, and because of that, that affected our culture in the Gauntlet, right? Because we were in G+, we were exposed, or we were closer to the more toxic elements of the hobby, right? And it was just by happenstance, because that's kind of where I found the Gauntlet, right? And so that kind of caused our culture to be a certain way, this sort of man the walls defensive culture, right? Which has gotten me in trouble lately. But this sort of man the walls defensive culture, that's kind of where that came from, right? And so as we have sort of we gave G+ the shaft quite a while ago, right? I mean, we haven't been there in a while, really, not super actively anyway. But we've definitely had to I think we're having to adjust to a new paradigm, a new role-playing game culture, right? And that's just something, that's something that will take time and that we're doing. But I'm loving the forums so far. I think the forums are a great, great expression of what the future of the Gauntlet looks like. And I know some people in our Slack will be rueful about that because they love the Slack, and I love the Slack. But I feel we have to have a public space.
Absolutely.
The Gauntlet must have a public space. It cannot be a closed off space always, right? And that was G+ for us before. But G+ kind of went downhill, and so then functionally we just became a Slack group, right? Kind of functionally that's what it became. But now we have the forums. We have this public place. I'm really excited to get more involved in it myself. I'm certainly not the most involved person yet. I'm kind of a bystander really at this point. But I'm loving reading the conversations, and I really just want to get in there and build them up and make them great. So do my part. And listeners, that's our show. We are the Gauntlet. I forgot what I was about to say. We are the Gauntlet. This is the Gauntlet podcast. It's beautiful and lovely. It's been an emotional podcast. A very happy podcast. I'm super excited. I think you can reach us in different places, and one of those places is our website, gauntlet-rpg.com. We have forums as well. As I mentioned, it's forums.gauntlet-rpg.com if you want to chat with us. We are on Twitter at GauntletRPG, and we are on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. I love talking to you guys any chance I get.
Awesome. And Lowell, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
And listeners, that's our show.